Hey, welcome back to Clean Cut, where we can talk about the truth about just about anything, as long as we use logic and common sense.
This season, we're returning to the topic of the Psalms and their meaning. Now, a brief disclaimer before getting into this psalm. The Psalms will be numbered differently in different translations of the Bible. This is a very, very old discrepancy, and to help clear things up, we'll be explaining what number the psalm has in the Douay-Rheims Bible and in the Revised Standard Version. However, the episodes themselves will list psalm numbers as they're given in the Douay-Rheims Bible. Sorry if this is confusing. Anyway, this is Psalm 77 in the Douay-Rheims Bible, but Psalm 78 in the RSV. It's pretty long, but I'll try to get through it all in one episode. Understanding for Asaph, or knowledge of Asaph. Again, Asaph was in charge of the service of music during the reigns of David and Solomon. Attend, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. Listen to what I have to teach you. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter propositions from the beginning. How great things have we heard and known, and our fathers have told us. They have not been hidden from their children in another generation, declaring the praises of the Lord and his powers, and his wonders which he hath done. Information about the works that God did in older generations has been passed down to the current generation. These were deep, mysterious truths at the time, but things will become clearer during the time of Jesus and his apostles. And he set up a testimony in Jacob, and made a law in Israel, how great things he commanded our fathers, that they should make the same known to their children, that another generation might know them. God gave our ancestors extremely good rules to live by, and they were passed on to their children. The children that should be born and should rise up, and declare them to their children, that they may put their hope in God, and may not forget the works of God, and may seek his commandments, that they may not become like their fathers, a perverse and exasperating generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, and whose spirit was not faithful to God. People in previous generations didn't think about the things they should have, or do what they should have done. They should have remembered the incredible miracles and laws of God instead, and taken them seriously. The sons of Ephraim, who bend and shoot with the bow, they have turned back in the day of battle. They kept not the covenant of God, and in his law they would not walk, and they forgot his benefits, and his wonders that he had shewn them. Ephraim was the second son of Joseph, son of Jacob. He and his brother Manasseh both had half-tribes of Israelites who descended from them. It seems the descendants of Ephraim were given the task of doing some fighting, probably to do with conquering the land of Canaan, since that's the time when God gave them specific instructions to engage in war, and that if they fought, he would fight for them too. Some of the Israelites were too cowardly to fight the pagan Canaanites even then, and didn't trust God's promise, in spite of everything they'd already seen him do. Wonderful things did he do in the sight of their fathers, in the land of Egypt, in the field of Tanis. The field of Tanis probably refers to fields near the ruins of the city of Tanis today, which was located near the spot where the Nile River drained into the Mediterranean Sea. Unlike in Indiana Jones, though, the city of Tanis didn't actually have massive buried chambers full of snakes. This city is also sometimes believed to have been the biblical city of Zoan, a place where the people of Israel were enslaved in the past, which explains why it's mentioned here. He divided the sea and brought them through, and he made the waters to stand as in a vessel, and he conducted them with a cloud by day, and all the night with a light of fire. He struck the rock in the wilderness, and gave them to drink, as out of the great deep. He brought forth water out of the rock, and made streams run down as rivers. A brief list of just some of the miracles that God did for the people of Israel on their trip out of Egypt. And they added yet more sin against him. They provoked the Most High to wrath in the place without water. And they tempted God in their hearts by asking meat for their desires. And they spoke ill of God. They said, Can God furnish a table in the wilderness? Because he struck the rock, and the waters gushed out, and the streams overflowed. Can he also give bread or provide a table for his people? It wasn't just that the people of Israel wanted these things that was the problem. The problem was that they went about getting them not by asking for them in humility, but by challenging the power and goodness of God for not having given them out already. That's not the way to do it at all. God wants us to ask for these things so that we can grow in our relationship with him. Therefore the Lord heard and was angry, and a fire was kindled against Jacob, and wrath came up against Israel. because they believed not in God, and trusted not in his salvation. And he had commanded the clouds from above, and had opened the doors of heaven, and had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them the bread of heaven. Man ate the bread of angels. He sent them provisions in abundance. He removed the south wind from heaven, and by his power brought in the southwest wind. And he rained upon them flesh as dust, and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. And they fell in the midst of their camp, round about their pavilions. So they did eat, and were filled exceedingly, and he gave them their desire. They were not defrauded of that which they craved. As yet their meat was in their mouth. Because of the order in which these things are described, it sounds like God is saying that he sent them good food because the people didn't trust him. That's not how this should be read. These verses say that despite all the good food that God gave the Israelites on their journey, they still didn't trust him or believe that he could save them. And the wrath of God came upon them, and he slew the fat ones among them, and brought down the chosen men of Israel. In all these things they sinned still, and they believed not for his wondrous works. And their days were consumed in vanity, and their years in haste. Again, the ordering of this verse makes it difficult for the modern ear to decipher what it means to say. This is saying that since gifts and blessings weren't causing people to change their ways, God allowed horrible misfortunes to befall them. When this verse says that people's days were consumed in vanity, that means that they spent all day doing things that would have no lasting impact. When it says they spent their years in haste, that means that they were always in a rush to get things done because they didn't trust God to make sure the important things went well. When he slew them, then they sought him. And they returned, and came to him early in the morning. And they remembered that God was their helper, and the Most High God their Redeemer. The people turned back to God when they'd begun to suffer. And they loved him with their mouth, and with their tongue they lied unto him, but their heart was not right with him, nor were they counted faithful in his covenant. They praised God, but that didn't mean they were fully reformed. They were doing it mainly to protect themselves and still intended to sin. But he is merciful, and will forgive their sins, and will not destroy them. And many a time did he turn away his anger, and did not kindle all his wrath. And he remembered that they are flesh, a wind that goeth and returneth not. Mortal men don't come back into this same life after their death, with only a few notable exceptions, none of which existed at the time. And that, among other things, makes them very vulnerable to fears and temptations. Because of this, God forgives the sins of his people and repairs the relationships with them, which they damaged by sinning. How often did they provoke him in the desert and move him to wrath in the place without water? And they turned back and tempted God and grieved the Holy One of Israel. They remembered not his hand in the day that he redeemed them from the hand of him that afflicted them. Again, the unfaithfulness of the people of Israel is described. How he wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the field of Tanis, and he turned their rivers into blood, and their showers that they might not drink. He sent among them divers sores of flies, which devoured them, and frogs, which destroyed them. And he gave up their fruits to the blast, and their labors to the locust. And he destroyed their vineyards with hail, and their mulberry trees with hoarfrost. And he gave up their cattle to the hail, and their stock to the fire. And he sent upon them the wrath of his indignation and wrath and trouble, which he sent by evil angels. He made a way for a path to his anger, and spared not their souls from death, and their cattle he shut up in death. And he killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, the firstfruits of all their labor in the tabernacles of Cham. More of God's miracles are described, this time the plagues that he used against the land of Egypt. So the people of Israel should have realized that it's best to stay on good terms with God who caused them. And he took away his own people as sheep, and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. And he brought them out in hope, and they feared not. And the sea overwhelmed their enemies, and he brought them into the mountain of his sanctuary, the mountain which his right hand had purchased. And he cast out the Gentiles before them, and by lot divided to them their land by a line of distribution. And he made the tribes of Israel to dwell in their tabernacles. Even more of God's miracles and actions, this time the way he guided the people of Israel and brought them into a new land, giving them victory over their enemies. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God, and they kept not his testimonies. And they turned away and kept not the covenant. Even like their fathers they were turned aside as a crooked bow. They provoked him to anger on their hills, and moved him to jealousy with their graven things. God heard and despised them, and he reduced Israel exceedingly, as it were, to nothing. And he put away the tabernacle of Silo, his tabernacle where he dwelt among men. In spite of everything he'd given them, the people still turned against him to worship idols, and he punished them for it by allowing their kingdom to be reduced, and removing or hiding the tabernacle where the people had worshipped him in the place that we now call Shiloh. This event isn't actually described in the Bible, though. And he delivered their strength into captivity, and their beauty into the hands of the enemy. And he shut up his people under the sword, and he despised his inheritance. Fire consumed their young men, and their maidens were not lamented. Their priests fell by the sword, and their widows did not mourn. More terrible catastrophes, having to do with Israel's best warriors being taken prisoner by enemies and enslaved, and the people, men and women alike, being killed. And the Lord was awaked, as one out of sleep, and like a mighty man that hath been surfeited with wine, and he smote his enemies on the hinder parts. He put them to an everlasting reproach. God decided to take action, however, and kick the butts of Israel's enemies, disgracing them. And he rejected the tabernacle of Joseph, and chose not the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. This is probably why the cowardice of Ephraim was mentioned earlier as justification for this decision by God, choosing Judah. And he built his sanctuary as of unicorns in the land which he founded forever. God built a very strong fortress for his people. The term unicorns implies in this case the strength and toughness of an animal's horn. And he chose his servant David, and took him from the flocks of sheep. He brought him from following the ewes great with young, to feed Jacob his servant, and Israel his inheritance. God picked David to be a king, so that he'd be able to give the people of Israel what they really needed. Jacob is a distant ancestor of David, but here the word Jacob just means all the descendants of Jacob. And he fed them in the innocence of his heart, and conducted them by the skillfulness of his hands. David was both skilled and righteous, and did God's will for his people using those attributes. So this psalm opens with God's grievances against the unfaithful people of Israel. God presents what is essentially a list of the things he's done to deserve faithfulness from the people, interspersed with descriptions of their unfaithful actions, and then explains what he's been doing more recently, sending David to help rule and guide the people of Israel. God will never be outdone in generosity, and it often helps to remember how much God has done for us, and that when things go wrong in our lives, we should ask for God's help, but not accuse him or turn against him. He still loves us and wants to save us. We should never turn our backs on him.
That's all for now, so keep asking questions, and thanks for watching.